G'day guys. Okay, so we're up to lesson 3, and so what we'll be doing today is having a good look at variables. Okay, so we'll talk about what variables are, but the best way of kind of thinking about them is to think of them as being kind of like when you do algebra and you have, let's say, a linear equation and you have y equals x plus 4. And that means that x can be any value. Okay, so it can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever it is. And so a variable kind of works in much the same way. It's kind of a place to store information. So basically, we can use that variable and then we can alter the value of that variable. And variables are really important for programming, and it's something that's really that you have to use to create efficient code. Okay. So what I'm going to do today is, but first we'll clear out some of our little macros here for the moment. I'll get rid of the end sub. Okay. Alrighty, so basically what we'll do is we'll create a sub. Okay, so a subroutine, and we'll call it variable test. Okay. Okay, so we've created a new sub. All right, so the first thing we want to do is that when you create a variable, you can call it anything you like, provided that it's not already a command of some sort in VBA. So, for example, you can't call a variable a number, but you can give it a logical name, and you should. So whenever you're using a variable, you'll find that as your programming develops and you use more and more of them, that it can get really confusing. So it's not a good idea to call them just A, B, C, and D. You'll get away with it initially, but over time it just gets really confusing. So you always give it a name. Now the way that you declare a variable is traditionally you do that at the start of your sub, and you give it a name. So I'm going to give add one, okay. And so what I'm doing there is I'm declaring a variable. Okay, so if I wanted to, and this is something you should be doing, very well, I can document the code to tell me this is what this does. Okay, so all we're really doing is we're saying to the program is that you're about to get, we're about to use this particular item, and it's going to be called add_1. Okay, so we'll create a couple more variables. And I'm at this point, so I'll put a couple more in at the moment. So, and we'll create a third one. So we've got three variables now. Now, one of the things I will highlight at this stage, and I'll be honest, I'm a pretty lazy programmer, but there are things that you can also do with declaring the type of variable. So you can do things like as integer, it is. Okay. Oops. I'll put that back there. Okay. So what I've just done is is that I have actually told the computer basically there's a variable coming. It's called add_1 and as integer. Okay. Now you can be more specific about the what the variable is going to be. So, for example, there are several different, and we'll put them in here below so you can follow along if you like. We can declare it an integer, okay, which, if you remember your maths, just means it's a numeric value that is up to 30,000 K or 30,000, 32,000 to be precise. Okay, so that means that you can, if you declare that and you put any number below 32 as its value, it's going to be quite happy. However, if the value is going to be above 32,000 for some reason, you could change the classification to long. can be a bigger number, basically. So if you have something way, way bigger, that's what you can declare. Okay, the other types is what's called a Boolean. Okay, we better put a little comment in here. And that base Boolean is a term that is often used. You'll hear it used occasionally if you get more familiar. And it basically just means true or false. Okay, so it means the return of the value can only be a true or false. You can also do things like string, okay, which string just means text. Okay, and then we have things like double, which I think is decimals. I think there's also single as well. Okay, so basically sometimes when you'll see other coders at some point, you'll see that they're being very specific as integer or whatever. Okay, this for my purpose and for the level you're going to get to with programming, it's probably not absolutely critical that you do that. You can just declare the variables and that'll be just fine in most cases. The only reason that people do things like, so for example, if we had numbers and we didn't know whether it was going to be over 32,000 or below 32,000, we could just change that to long. Now, the reason you would do this in the case is, well, why wouldn't you just declare long as the variable every single time? Well, the reason why is because it actually reduces the amount of memory that's required and speeds up the code. However, for the purpose of what we're doing, speed is not, I'm not overly concerned about that. So if you want to declare a variable and just put dim, that's absolutely fine. Okay, I'll leave these things on the screen just for you. Okay, so if we want to use these variables, what we can do is that we can assign a value. Okay, so we can assign the value, in this case, I'm going to assign the value of 3. That's an example. Okay, and the rules in terms of how you assign the value is that you can assign another variable to it. You can also assign text, and you can also assign numeric values as well. Okay, so if we let's give just use these now a little bit. Okay, and let's make this one value 5. Okay, so and then if we wanted to get our sum result, so we wanted to add these two numbers together. Okay, we could do something like 3, add 1 plus add 2. Okay, so what we're basically now telling it when we do this is that whatever the value of add 1 is and add 2, literally add them together. And that will give you a sum result. So if we wanted to display that result, we could do that on the spreadsheet over here. However, you can do a lot of these things without even showing anything to the user on the actual Excel spreadsheet. So let's get a message box and we'll and put that through. Okay, so if we run our code, play, okay, we get the result 8. Now, whenever you're doing these sort of things, as you would have seen in the last lesson, I made an error with one of the codes, is that you want to make sure that you understand what you're expecting this result to be so that you can verify that the code is actually working as you would expect. Okay, so if we wanted to do something like we wanted to be a little bit more explicit about the information that we want to give to the user, because obviously they don't, unless they see the code, they don't know what's driven that number of 8. We can put in an extra message, just like what we've done yesterday. Okay. So let's say, for example, we want to put in a message saying 3 plus 5 equals 8 is what we want to get it to do. But we want to make sure that this output is variable so that we can come along and change the values. So what's a good idea at this point is to pause the video and actually have an attempt at trying to get that that piece of code to do what you want it to do. Okay, so now I'll show you how to do it. So hopefully you've just paused the video, how to go. Okay, so if we want to display, if we add number 1 and add number 2, and then we want to put in some text, it will equal the sum result. Okay, so if we run the code, now I've intentionally put in a couple of things which are going to not give you the ideal display, but it'll give you an idea of why using a message box is really useful for making sure that you're verifying that your code is doing what it's supposed to. Okay, so that hasn't really given you the output you want. It's not very nice. So 3, we've got a few problems there. Okay, so we've got the 3 and the 5 placed right next to it. We really need a space. And so we also might want to put plus in the middle, and we might want to put a space between equal and 8. Okay, so we can do that by saying, okay, we want to put a plus middle, and the way that I'm going to put the extra space, so at the moment I'll run it again just before we go. Okay, so we still haven't quite got the outcome we want because we've got 3 plus 5 and it's all in one lot of text. So we need to put some spaces in. So I'm going to put a space there and a space there, and we'll fix up the equal one as well. Okay, and that is an example of just debugging to get it. Oh, still made a space. Yeah, still an error. So we need a space there as well. Okay, and that's going to give us something that's more useful for the user to get back. Now, of course, now what we always want to do is verify that this is exactly doing what we want. Okay, so I'm going to change the 2 numbers. Okay, so, and again, you want to make sure that you're putting in things that you have an expectation about what the result would be. Okay, so we should get 7 plus 2, and I think it will equal the 9 is what we should expect to see. Okay. Okay, so that's fine. That's working well. Okay. Now, what we want to do now is we want to show you how variables can be altered through your code. So what we've done here in the first bit of code here is we've actually declared the value. We've declared the variable. This is the variable, and then we've assigned a value. And that's fine. Now, if we want to assign a new value to it through our code and we want to display something else, we can give it a new name. So let's say I'm going to take these 3 bits of code and I'm going to pop it up here. Just take a copy of it. Okay. And what we want to do is now I'm going to give it 8 and 9 as assigned value. Okay. And we'll pop our output down here as well. Okay, so what we're doing here is basically we're saying, okay, we initially created these variables, we assigned them 7 and 2, and now we're reassigning them 8 and 9. Okay, and then we're going to complete the same calculation, and we are going to then put the output. So what you should expect to see is 2 sums in a row displayed. So for the first sum, which is the first part of the code, and then the second one. Okay, so what that's showing to you is that we can reuse this variable multiple times. So we can keep doing this and keep displaying it and keep displaying it until such time as we're done with it. Okay, and we can even reset it and we can do things. So let's say we'll do one more example. Okay, so let's say we do. Just take that code down a little bit further. Okay. So now what we want to do is, let's say that instead of instead I want the sum that was just completed here, so this one here, I want it to go up by 1. Okay, so the way that I would do that is I'd say, okay, add 1 is now going to equal add 1, the value what it was prior. So when this add 1 comes in, okay, so when the code progresses to this point here, this line here, the value before this line of code, according to up here, to the previous declaration, it's going to be 8. Okay, so if we want it to go up by 1, we want to say, well, add 1 is now going to equal add 1, and then we're going to add another 1 to it. Okay? So you can actually complete sums. Okay. Okay, and we've done the same thing, and then if we follow our code along, we should expect to see three message box come up. The first one's going to be 7 and 2 as the sum numbers being added. 8 and 9 are going to be the next ones that will be shown, and then the last one will be that we are showing we're doing a calculation of 9 and 10. Okay, so if we push our code, away we go. Okay, and 9 and 10. Okay, so that's an example of creating and using variables multiple times. Okay, now one other thing that I do want to highlight at this point, and we'll just take this bit of code out, is a little thing that they sometimes get you to do. It's called option explicit. If you put that at the top of your code, you'll see that it just says option explicit. Now, I just want to show you what happens when we add that, what happens. Okay, so let's say I do a bit of a spelling mistake on my variable and I forget to add an extra D. So if I do that, it says, I don't recognize this. So what that option explicit basically does is it kind of gets you to do a series of spelling checks and says, all right, is this variable declared? Is it in the right place? Etc. So because I've misspelled it intentionally, it's telling me that there's something wrong. Okay, so if we do correct that, and that's so in a lot of codes you will see that option explicit put at the top. Okay, so hopefully that kind of makes sense. So we'll get you to do a bit of a have a bit of a go yourself. Okay, so the task for today is you're going to create a spreadsheet, and that displays the 2 times table one at a time. So using variables. So i.e. you want to have it displaying 2 times 1 equals 2, 2 times 2 equals 4, 2 times 3 equals 6, etc. Okay, so maybe get it to display 4 or 5 different outputs in the same code. Okay, so enjoy, and make sure that you do always play around with the code multiple times, try things, get things wrong. That's how you're going to get really good at it very, very quickly. Okay, we'll catch you next time, guys.